What if hunger could take shape? Not the hunger you feel before dinner, but an endless, gnawing emptiness so powerful it could strip away your humanity and twist you into something else. In the frozen forests of the north, where winters swallow the land in silence and snow, the Algonquian peoples whispered of a name they dared not speak aloud, a spirit born of famine, a shadow that walked on two legs thin as bone, taller than any man, with eyes that burned like dying embers. They said it was always starving, that the more it ate, the larger it grew, and the hungrier it became. Some claimed it could mimic the voices of those you loved most, a child crying in the storm, a wife calling your name, a sound so familiar, so impossible to ignore, luring you deeper into the woods, until you realized too late that it was not them. Others swore they heard it in the wind itself, whispering promises of survival, feed, live, join me. And once you heard that voice, there was no escaping it. This is the Wendigo, not just a story to frighten children, but a nightmare etched into the snow and blood of the northern wilderness. Tonight, on Sleepy Secrets History, we open the door to that nightmare. Stay with us, because if the Wendigo begins to whisper your name, turning back may no longer be an option. Long before the first European settlers carved roads into the wilderness, North America was ruled by winter. Endless forests of pine stretched to the horizon, lakes froze solid as stone, and storms swallowed entire villages in silence. For the Algonquian peoples, the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Innu, this was not myth but survival. Winters were not seasons, they were trials. Food stores ran dry, animals vanished into the trees, families huddled in lodges counting each ember, each scrap of dried meat, praying it would last until spring. And always, in the background, there was the fear of hunger, not the ordinary kind, but the hunger that clawed at the mind, the kind that stripped away reason and drove people to the edge of unthinkable acts. From that terror, a legend was born, the Wendigo. They said it was once human, a hunter lost in the storm, a father watching his children starve, a wanderer cut off from his people, someone who, in desperation, broke the ultimate taboo, consuming the flesh of his own kind. But the punishment was swift and eternal. The moment the forbidden act was committed, something ancient awoke. A spirit of endless hunger slipped into the body, twisting it from within. The man was gone, and in his place rose a creature cursed to wander the snow forever. Gaunt, hollow, ravenous. Imagine the fear this story carried. In the dead of winter, when the fire burned low and the cupboard stood empty, every parent told their children, "Do not give in, do not break the law of life, or you will become the Wendigo." The lesson was clear. Starvation threatened the body, but the Wendigo threatened the soul. Different tribes told the story in different ways. Among the Cree, it was a giant whose heart was frozen solid. Among the Ojibwe, it was a shadow with the power to slip into starving men and twist them into monsters. The Innu described it as both a being and a curse, a warning that selfishness could destroy an entire community. And beneath every version lay the same truth. The Wendigo was more than a monster. It was a mirror, a reminder of what desperation could do. Picture a hunter snowbound for weeks with nothing left to eat. He looks at the frozen body of a companion and feels temptation stir. He hesitates, and in that moment he hears something in the wind, soft, persuasive, almost kind. A whisper that is not his own voice. Eat, survive, join me. That is how the legend was told. Not as a faraway myth, but as a presence close enough to touch. Close enough to hear. The Wendigo was never just about fear of starvation. It was about boundaries, the line no one must cross, no matter the cost. To break it was to trade humanity for damnation. And so, in the frozen heart of North America, the Wendigo was born, not a beast of claws and teeth alone, but a spirit of hunger without end, a curse that turned survival itself into horror. What happens when the line is crossed? When desperation becomes the doorway and the first forbidden bite is taken? The stories say that the change begins almost immediately. The human body cannot contain the spirit of endless hunger. Fever burns through the victim, hotter than any fire, yet their skin grows cold and pale, as if frost has entered their veins. The body stretches unnaturally, bones cracking and reshaping. A man who once stood ordinary now looms tall, towering over the trees. Skin clings so tightly to the skeleton that ribs and joints jut out like jagged blades. Some legends say the flesh turns gray, like a corpse frozen in the snow. Others claim it grows white as ice, blending with the winter storms. And then the face. Eyes sink deep into the skull, but glow with a dim, ember-like light, like coals that refuse to die. The lips are often gone, chewed away in fits of ravenous hunger, leaving teeth exposed in a permanent snarl. The voice, when it speaks, is thin and hollow, carried on the wind like a whisper you cannot ignore. The heart, according to Cree tradition, is the most terrible part of all. It is no longer flesh and blood, but a solid mass of ice, frozen so completely that no warmth can ever reach it again. The Wendigo is not simply cold, it is the cold, and yet the most frightening transformation is not physical, it is eternal hunger. Once the Wendigo feeds, it grows, but the larger it becomes, the hungrier it is. A cycle without end. Imagine a prison of your own body, where every bite only makes you emptier, every feast leaves you starving. This is the curse of the Wendigo, consumption without satisfaction, desire without end. Among the Ojibwe, this was not only punishment for cannibalism, it was a warning about greed. A man who hoarded food while his neighbors starved could be marked by the Wendigo spirit. His body would twist. His heart would freeze until he was no longer a man at all. Hunger was not the only crime. Selfishness, too, could summon the monster. Folklore insists that the transformation is irreversible. Once the soul has been claimed, there is no return. Families who saw the signs in a loved one, sunken eyes, relentless appetite, strange voices, knew what was coming. Some tribes believed the only mercy was to end the victim's life before the Wendigo spirit fully took hold. Now imagine this through their eyes. You are sitting in a dim lodge, snow pressing heavy on the roof. Across the fire, a hunter stares at you with hollow eyes. He has not slept. His skin looks tight, unnatural, and when the wood pops in the flames, you swear you hear him whisper words that are not his own. Would you dare to stay another night? This is why the legend endures, because the Wendigo is not a creature waiting in the shadows. It is a transformation waiting inside the human heart. It is the moment when need becomes greed, when survival becomes sin. And once that moment comes, the monster is born. The Wendigo is not a mindless beast. It is a predator, cold, calculated, patient. Legends say it moves through the forest with a silence that mocks the snow. No branch snaps beneath its weight. No breath clouds the air. One moment the woods are empty. The next you realize the shadows between the trees have shifted, and something is watching. Its strength is said to be inhuman. It can tear through frozen timber, outrun a deer across drifts, and yet it prefers not to waste its power. For the Wendigo does not hunt with claws alone. It hunts with fear. Among the Ojibwe, it was whispered that the Wendigo could mimic voices. A child crying for help, a brother calling your name, a wife begging you to return. The sound was so real, so impossible to ignore, that even the cautious were lured deeper into the forest. Imagine stumbling through the snow, following the desperate voice of someone you love, only to find yourself face to face with something that wears no human kindness in its eyes. This is the cruelty of the Wendigo. It does not strike immediately. It toys with its prey. It lets the cold do half the work. Days without sleep, whispers in the wind, shadows just out of sight, until the victim is too weak, too paranoid, too broken to resist. By the time the Wendigo steps into the open, the battle is already lost. Some tribes spoke of a darker terror still. You did not need to see the Wendigo for it to claim you. Its very presence carried with it a sickness of the mind. Hunters spoke of feeling watched, of hearing phantom voices, of nightmares so vivid they blurred into waking life. The fear itself consumed them, driving them mad until they believed the hunger had entered their own hearts. This is what became known in later years as Wendigo Psychosis, the belief that one had been touched by the spirit and was destined to become the monster. Villages feared such men more than the storms themselves, for madness spreads faster than frost, and the suspicion that anyone could carry the hunger tore communities apart. But imagine again sitting alone in the forest. You have built your fire, but the flames do little to hold back the dark. Then you hear it, a voice, familiar, urgent, calling your name. Do you stay by the fire, or do you rise to follow? Do you risk ignoring the cry of your own child, only to discover it was no child at all? The Wendigo's greatest weapon is not its teeth or its claws. It is doubt. It is the question in your mind that gnaws louder than hunger. And once that question takes root, once you cannot tell wind from whisper, friend from foe, the Wendigo has already won. Not all Wendigos were said to roam the forests. Some were found within the walls of the village itself. Among the Algonquian peoples, fear of the Wendigo did not only live in whispered tales. It was a fear that shaped lives, decisions, even justice, because sometimes the monster was not seen in the woods. It was seen in the eyes of a neighbor, a brother, a father. Villagers told of men who returned from hunting trips changed. They were gaunt, restless, their appetite insatiable. No matter how much food they were given, it was never enough. They muttered in the night, their eyes hollow, their voices strange. Soon, whispers began. The Wendigo has touched him. This creeping dread became known in later years as Wendigo Psychosis, a sickness of the mind, a condition where men and women believed themselves possessed by the Wendigo spirit, or destined to transform into it. But was it truly madness, or was it the legend taking root in the cracks of hunger and fear? One of the most chilling accounts comes from the 17th century. Missionaries in what is now Canada wrote of families who accused their own kin of turning into Wendigos. Some were executed in rituals meant to save the community. The records are brief, almost evasive, as if the writers themselves feared to describe too much. But the echoes remain. In the 19th century, there is the infamous case of Swift Runner, a Cree man who during the famine of 1878 murdered and consumed members of his family. When brought to trial, he insisted that the Wendigo had driven him to it. The court condemned him, but to his people, his fate was a grim reminder of what happens when hunger and legend intertwine. Stories like these blur the line between folklore and history. Were these men truly mad, victims of starvation and despair, or had they, in some way beyond our understanding, been touched by the spirit of the Wendigo itself? Imagine being part of such a community. The snow presses against the lodge, food runs low, and then you notice one of your companions growing restless, staring too long at the others, his hand trembling whenever the fire snaps. Do you dismiss it as fatigue, or do you fear that something darker is taking hold? For the Algonquian tribes, the answer could be deadly. Better to act too soon than too late. For once a Wendigo rose within your walls, it was already too late. Modern scholars try to explain it, linking the tales to starvation psychosis, or even poisoning from ergot fungus in spoiled bread. But for those who lived in the frozen wilderness centuries ago, explanations did not matter. What mattered was survival, and survival meant vigilance. The Wendigo was not always a monster of the trees. Sometimes it was the man sitting across from you, the neighbor at your side, the hunter you had known since childhood. And once suspicion took root, trust dissolved. Fear consumed more quickly than famine. This is the terror of Wendigo psychosis. You do not need to see the creature to feel its presence. It is the doubt in your mind, the whisper in your ear, the suspicion in your heart. It is the moment you ask yourself, what if the Wendigo is already here? If the Wendigo could be born from hunger, from greed, from desperation, then how could it be stopped? For the Algonquian peoples, the answer was never simple. The Wendigo was not an ordinary predator. Steel and arrows passed through its body as if through smoke. No ordinary fire could burn away its curse. To face the Wendigo was to face a spirit as much as a creature, and only spirit could fight spirit. Some stories tell of shamans, medicine men who walked between the world of the living and the realm of spirits. When whispers of a Wendigo spread through a village, it was the shaman who was called. He would beat drums into the night, chant words older than memory, and call upon protective spirits to shield the people. Fires were stoked high, not only for warmth, but to drive back the cold essence of the Wendigo itself. But sometimes rituals were not enough. If a man showed signs of transformation, an insatiable appetite, a strange fever, eyes that refused the firelight, the community faced a terrible choice. Some tribes believed the only way to save the people was to end the victim's life before the change was complete. It was not an act of cruelty, but of mercy. For once the Wendigo fully rose, no power on earth could call the human back. Other tales speak of direct hunts. The Wendigo, though fearsome, was said to have one weakness: its frozen heart. Deep within its gaunt chest beat a core of solid ice. To kill it, one had to shatter that heart, or melt it with fire so intense that the ice could not resist. Some legends describe warriors armed with blades heated in flame, or tipped with silver and thrust into the heart of the beast. Even then, the battle was never certain. And even after the Wendigo fell, the danger was not over. Its body, they said, had to be cut into pieces, burned to ash, and scattered to the four winds. To bury it was to risk resurrection. To leave it unburned was to invite its spirit to rise again. Every ritual, every action was aimed at one desperate goal: to keep the hunger from returning. Imagine the scene. A frozen clearing lit only by fire. Warriors circle the body of a fallen Wendigo, their faces grim. The shaman chants, casting handfuls of herbs into the flames. The air fills with bitter smoke rising into the winter sky, and as the fire devours the remains, the people stand silent, waiting to hear if the forest will grow quiet again, or if the wind will still carry whispers through the trees. Not all believed the Wendigo could be destroyed. Some said it could only be driven away, forced back into the shadows until hunger summoned it once more. In this telling, the battle was never truly won. Humanity was safe only so long as it honored the sacred law. Never consume your own kind. Never let greed devour the community. These rituals and tales remind us that the Wendigo was more than a monster to be feared. It was a moral boundary, a living reminder that survival came not from selfishness, but from unity. To share food was to resist, to care for the weak was to protect the village, and to break the taboo was to invite the Wendigo inside your own heart. So the fires burned, the drums echoed, and the chants carried through the winter night. And though the people never forgot the terror of the Wendigo, they also never forgot the lesson, that the battle against hunger was not only fought in the forest, it was fought within the soul. The Wendigo is more than a monster. It is a mirror, a reflection of something ancient and terrible, not only in the forest, but within ourselves. The Algonquian peoples understood this. Their winters were brutal, their lives balanced on the edge of survival. In such a world, selfishness was not just a vice, it was a death sentence for the community. A man who hoarded food while others starved could destroy an entire village. A hunter who betrayed his kin in desperation could doom his people. And so the Wendigo became the ultimate warning, not simply the punishment for cannibalism, but the embodiment of greed itself. Every description of the Wendigo carries this truth. It is gaunt, yet ever-growing, hollow, yet always expanding. It devours endlessly, but is never satisfied. What is that, if not the image of greed made flesh? The more it consumes, the hungrier it becomes. The more it takes, the emptier it feels. It is a cycle without end, a hunger that destroys not only the victim, but the creature itself. The Cree and Ojibwe did not tell these stories merely to terrify children. They told them to draw a line in the snow. This is what happens when you let hunger, greed, and selfishness consume you. The Wendigo is what waits beyond that line. Think of it as a spirit of imbalance. In a world where survival depended on sharing, the Wendigo represented the breaking of trust, the collapse of community. To see a Wendigo was to see what happens when one person's need becomes greater than the needs of all. But the symbolism did not end there. To many storytellers, the Wendigo also reflected humanity's relationship with the natural world. Endless consumption, endless hunger. Does that sound familiar? Some modern voices have called the Wendigo a prophecy, a warning not only for villages in the snow, but for all of us. A world that devours forests, rivers, and resources without restraint risks becoming Wendigo itself, growing larger, emptier, hungrier with each passing year. This is why the Wendigo still resonates today, because hunger has many forms. It is not only the growl in the stomach, it is the craving for wealth without mercy, for power without limits, for more and more when nothing will ever be enough. The Wendigo is the monster of appetite, the specter of excess, the curse of never-ending desire. And perhaps that is why its heart is said to be made of ice. A frozen core, cold, lifeless, unreachable. For greed, once it takes root, numbs all warmth, silences all compassion, and leaves only a hollow echo where humanity once lived. Picture again the figure in the snow, towering, skeletal, its eyes burning faintly in the dark. What makes it terrifying is not its claws, nor its height. It is the recognition. Deep down, we know what it is. We know what it represents. Because the Wendigo is not only out there wandering the forests of the frozen north. It is the whisper inside us, the hunger we all fear but cannot deny. And so the lesson endures. Share when you can, resist when you must. Never surrender to the endless hunger. For once you do, you will find yourself walking beside the Wendigo. Your heart frozen, your soul forever starving. The Wendigo is remembered in stories told by firelight, but its shadow also lingers in written records, scattered, fragmented, often hidden between the lines. When outsiders first came to the northern wilderness, they heard whispers of the creature. Some dismissed them, others wrote them down, but many accounts quietly vanished. In the 17th century, Jesuit missionaries traveling through what is now Quebec described hearing of a spirit of famine that possessed men and drove them to madness. One report spoke of families who feared a hunter had been taken and chose to abandon him in the forest rather than risk his return. The words are brief, cautious, almost reluctant. Scholars note that later editions of these records omitted the references entirely. Was it superstition the missionaries wished to erase, or something they dared not put into print? In the fur-trading posts of the 18th century, trappers and voyageurs told darker tales. Men vanished without trace, their sleds discovered abandoned, dogs frozen in their harnesses, supplies untouched. In journals, one phrase repeats, "The Wendigo was abroad." These lines were often crossed out, overwritten, or left untranslated when reports were sent back to Europe, but the handwriting remains. And then there are the disappearances, hunters gone missing during storms, their tracks ending abruptly in open snow, whole families lost to the cold, with no sign of struggle, no evidence of attack. The forest swallowed them without a trace. To the communities who survived them, there was only one explanation. The Wendigo had taken them. One chilling account survives from the 19th century. A group of lumbermen in Ontario reported strange cries echoing through the pines at night, voices that seemed to mimic their own. One man swore he heard his mother calling him, though she was hundreds of miles away. Fear spread through the camp. Days later, 2 workers vanished. Their footprints led into the snow and stopped. The report was filed, but no investigation followed. Only a single note remains in the margins. Wendigo. Why were so many of these accounts left incomplete? Why do official records speak in half-sentences and whispers, as if the writers themselves feared what they described? Perhaps it was easier to reduce the Wendigo to folklore, to consign it to the realm of myth. But the silences in history are often the loudest voices of all. Imagine being one of those trappers, sitting in your log cabin as the wind howls outside. You know your partner has not returned. You read the reports of men vanishing, of footprints ending in the snow. And in the night, you hear something, your name carried through the blizzard. Do you write it in your journal? Or do you leave the page blank, knowing no one would believe you? The Wendigo is not only a legend carved into the memory of indigenous peoples, it is a shadow that haunts the margins of history. Missionaries, traders, lumbermen, all brushed against it. Some tried to explain it away, others refused to speak of it again. But the fragments that remained suggest something chilling, that the Wendigo's story was not just told in folklore, but lived in reality. And if so many voices fell silent, one must ask, what did they see in the forest? What was it that could not be written? Legends do not die. They change their shape, wearing new masks to haunt new generations. The Wendigo, once whispered only in the smoke-filled lodges of the Algonquian peoples, has wandered far beyond the frozen forests of the north. It has found its way into novels, films, and video games. Its name now spoken by audiences who may never have felt the bite of a northern winter. In literature, the Wendigo first stepped into Western imagination through Algernon Blackwood's chilling 1910 story, The Wendigo. Here the creature is not only a monster of hunger, but a cosmic terror, something vast, elemental, and inescapable. Readers in Edwardian England, far removed from the Great Lakes and Canadian forests, shivered at the thought of an invisible presence stalking men through the wilderness. Hollywood followed. In films, the Wendigo has been many things. A towering antlered beast, a skeletal giant, even a ghostly spirit. Horror directors borrow the name but twist the form, reshaping it into whatever will most terrify their audiences. In some stories it is a forest demon, in others a cursed spirit of vengeance. The true Algonquian Wendigo, gaunt, hollow, hunger incarnate, is often lost beneath these reinventions. Video games, too, have embraced the myth. Until Dawn introduced players to a grotesque, feral version of the Wendigo, one that stalks its victims through abandoned mines. Comic books and television series borrow its name, draping it in new designs, new powers, new symbols. Each retelling pulls the Wendigo further from its roots, yet somehow the core remains. A creature defined by hunger, an enemy you cannot satisfy. But beneath the layers of entertainment lies a deeper truth. For indigenous communities, the Wendigo is not just a monster story. It is a cultural warning, a reminder of balance, generosity, and the danger of selfishness. To turn the Wendigo into nothing more than a movie monster risks stripping away the meaning it carried for centuries. And yet, perhaps this is the curse of the Wendigo itself. Just as the creature devours endlessly but is never full, so too has its legend been consumed again and again by popular culture, reshaped and retold without ever being satisfied. The story grows larger, more elaborate, but at its heart it remains hollow, a shadow of the original. Still, one must ask, why does the Wendigo endure? Why, out of all the monsters of folklore, does this one continue to haunt the imagination of modern audiences? Perhaps because its hunger is not bound to one time or place. The Wendigo is not chained to the past. Its lesson that greed and desire without end will destroy us feels as urgent today as it did in the snowbound winters of the Algonquian tribes. Whether we see it in the shadow of consumerism, in the exploitation of nature, or in the corruption of power, the Wendigo's hunger is still here. Picture the creature standing in the snow, ribs sharp, eyes glowing faintly. Now picture the hunger of a world that consumes without restraint. The resemblance is uncanny. The Wendigo is not simply alive in horror films or novels. It lives in the reflection of our own age. And so the legend continues, reshaped but unbroken. From the firelight of ancient lodges to the neon glow of cinema screens, the Wendigo still walks beside us, whispering in new forms. And whether we see it as folklore, fiction, or prophecy, one truth remains: the hunger never ends. The Wendigo is not alone. Across cultures and continents, humanity has always shaped its deepest fears into monsters, creatures that reflect the hungers, sins, and weaknesses we dread most. To understand the Wendigo more fully, we must hold it beside these other shadows and see what mirrors they reveal. Take the vampire. In Europe, tales of the undead feeding on blood spread terror through villages for centuries. The vampire, like the Wendigo, is defined by appetite. It drinks, but it is never quenched. It devours, but it never rests. Both monsters embody desire without end. Yet there is a crucial difference. The vampire often carries seduction, a strange allure that draws its victims willingly into its embrace. The Wendigo has no such mask. Its hunger is raw, its form hideous. Where the vampire whispers of forbidden pleasure, the Wendigo shrieks of desperation and despair. Then there is the werewolf, the beast within, clawing at the edges of humanity, waiting for the moment to break free. The Wendigo, too, begins as a human, transformed by forces that cannot be undone. But where the werewolf is chained to the cycles of the moon, cursed by fate, the Wendigo is chained to choice. To the moment a line was crossed, a taboo was broken, One is punishment thrust upon a man, the other is punishment summoned by his own hand. Look further still to the myths of Greece. Medusa, cursed by gods, her gaze turning men to stone. She is a symbol of fear, yes, but also of transformation. A woman wronged, twisted into a monster by forces beyond her control. The Wendigo shares this theme, humanity disfigured into monstrosity. Yet while Medusa's curse is divine, the Wendigo's curse is human. It is born not from gods, but from our own choices, our hunger, our greed, our selfishness. In each of these comparisons, the pattern is clear. The monsters endure because they speak not only of the world outside us, but of the shadows within us. The vampire is the hunger for forbidden desire. The werewolf is the rage of instincts unchained. Medusa is the pain of injustice twisted into terror. And the Wendigo is the hunger that never ends, the greed that consumes even as it grows. Perhaps this is why the Wendigo feels so raw, so unsettling. Other monsters may frighten us, but they often exist at a distance, in castles, in ancient myths, in faraway lands. The Wendigo, by contrast, was born in the snow, just beyond the village walls. It was not a stranger's curse, but your own neighbor's whisper. It was not a punishment from the gods, but a punishment from within. And perhaps most haunting of all, these legends, though separated by oceans and centuries, seem to echo one another. Different names, different faces, but always the same warning. There is a line that must not be crossed, a hunger that must not be fed, a desire that once unleashed will strip away everything that makes us human. So when you think of the Wendigo, do not see it as an isolated monster of the north. See it as part of a greater tapestry of dark folklore, threads that bind together our fears, our sins, our secrets. See it as one voice among many, all whispering the same truth, that the greatest horror is not what waits in the shadows, it is what waits inside us. The wind howls across the frozen trees. The fire is nearly gone, and somewhere in the silence of the night, a voice calls your name. Was it only the storm, or something older, something hungrier? The Wendigo is not just a monster of dark folklore, it is a reflection of us. Born in the hunger of northern winters, it became the embodiment of the line no human must cross. To consume your own kind, to surrender to greed, to let selfishness devour community. These were not simply sins, they were the birth of the Wendigo, but its shadow has grown larger than its origin. For centuries it has lingered in hidden accounts, whispered in the forests, reshaped in books and films, and through every retelling, one truth remains: the hunger never ends. Perhaps that is why the Wendigo still unsettles us today. It is not locked in the past. It is not confined to snow and legend. Its warning reaches into the modern world, where hunger takes many forms. We see it in greed without limit, in the endless craving for more, in the cold that spreads when compassion is lost. The Wendigo's heart is ice, and once that ice takes root, no fire can melt it. So remember this: when the night grows long and the wind rattles your walls, the Wendigo may not stand before you in flesh and bone, but its whisper lives on, in the temptations we face, in the choices we make, in the endless appetite that waits just beneath the surface. And that whisper asks the same question it always has: what will you do when hunger comes for you? This was Sleepy Secrets History. If you wish to continue wandering through the haunted corridors of dark folklore and hidden history, make sure to subscribe and join us again, because the Wendigo is only one shadow among many, and the night still has countless secrets to tell.